Hey, my friends, this is Bill MacDonald, the writing doctor. God bless you and yours, whoever they might be. Welcome to the video, third grade ELAR Editing Set 1. Now, I would tell you that I'm going to do Set 2, but when I checked the PDF, I found out there is no Set 2. It's just a repeat of Set 1. So hopefully they didn't do that for all the other grades as well. But be sure to be watching 4th through 8th grade for my posts about modeling and mentoring on how to familiarize yourselves with the editing and revising portion of the field tests, which will be this coming year for 3rd, 5th, 6th, and 8th. And of course, this is the last year coming up in 4th and 7th grade for the writing as it has been traditionally. So a lot of you already know the rules, but this video is going to be more for you reading teachers out there who are having to cross that bridge and begin to touch on editing and revising with your students as well as the reading concepts. Now, I also have changed 2 of the questions in this set 1 to make them open-ended because we are told that after next year, 25% of the questions in all subjects and grade levels are going to be open-ended. So keep in mind at any time if you have a question or need some clarification, feel free to pause the video. And as you can see right over my shoulder there, you can email me or message me, or I have all my social media connections right there for you to be able to touch bases. And I want it to be about we, you and me, working together to help your kids. Sometimes teachers feel like it's all about me, all on their own. So without further ado, let me get you started on editing set 1 for 3rd grade. Here we go. Okay, everyone, take a close look at the top of this first passage here. And right away, I noticed something different about the editing passages. And normally, whether you're doing editing, revising, or a reading passage, there's always going to be a title above the instructions. But in this case, they chose not to do it. And when I checked the revising to see if they had a title, they did. So keep in mind that one of the clues possibly about knowing whether it's editing or revising is going to be to check if there's a title or not. Apparently, we'll check and see as we go if that changes or not. Now, I have a lot of teachers who have differences of opinion on reading the entire passage first, reading the instructions first, reading the questions first. Well, if you look closely at this passage, I've already highlighted the only 3 questions that are being asked about. And when you look at the instructions, I underlined or highlighted the word corrections, and I highlighted the word story as well. Now, the reason I did that is I highly recommend that before you let your kids touch the passage or the questions, have them do what I have down here called a pre-read. The pre is just an acronym that stands for a couple of different things. What's the purpose? What kind of writing passage is it? Well, you can see right here, it's a story. But when I looked at the story itself, it was in first person and in past tense. So you could tell your students this is sort of like a personal narrative, something that happened to me in my past, okay? Something else you can look at is point of view. Is it first person? Is it second person? Is it third person? Well, this is, as we mentioned, a story about me. So this is first person. And so because it's first person from the very first sentence, the entire passage needs to stay in first person. And then you can check another P. Is it if it's a story, then is it written in past tense or is it written in present tense? Because stories are written in both ways. And then the last thing you can check, is it R revising or is it E editing? And let's take a look at some of the keywords. It says here on the second line, look for corrections. Anytime it says corrections, you can tell your kids they're going to be doing editing. And the second they see that word corrections, they're going to write CUPS. Now, typically speaking, most of us are familiar with regular CUPS, C-U-P-S, but I want you to notice that I have an extra S there because in 4th, 7th, 9th, and 10th, sometimes they will not ask a question, what change? Let me show you in my advanced folder what the 4th, 7th, and 9th, and 10th have to deal with. It'll say, what change in sentence blank, and it's always going to be CUPS. And CUPS, the first 4 letters, is capitalization, usage, punctuation, or spelling. And on the writing grades, I go into great detail in their advanced folder. This is called the Advanced ELAR Writing Folder. Okay. But sometimes the questions are like number 2 and number 3. It'll say, what is the correct or best way to write a sentence? It's the correct and sentence singular. That means it's a ROF, what I call a ROF. A ROF is a run-on or it's a fragment. If it says instead, what is the correct or best way to write sentences blank and blank, sentences plural, blank and blank plural, that means it's usually a SAF or a FAS. What does that mean? It means that the first one is a sentence and the second one is a fragment and incomplete thought. Or if you flip it around, that the first one's the fragment and the second one is the sentence. Now, I don't know how much that's going to change, but I do know for sure that on these 2 passages that we're going to look at today, it's all about CUPS, as in capitalization, usage, punctuation, or spelling. So when you look at that, let me show you the primary folder, how it looks a little bit different. I have it in dual language because I work all over Texas and we have a lot of kids who are not quite ready to transition to English. And so Spanish is their more dominant language. So I have them side by side, and the same thing that CUPS stands for in English, MUPOO is the Spanish translation. Capitalization in English is mayúsculas y minúsculas in Spanish. Usage in English is uso in Spanish. Punctuation in English is puntuación in Spanish. Spelling in English is ortografía. Notice the accents. They had 2 questions on last year's test that just required the students in Spanish just to place an accent above the word. So that's changing the pronunciación. So you could probably put a little P right here as well and say pronunciación as well as puntuación. So whether it's in English or Spanish, typically CUPS is going to be the mistake that you'll be looking for whenever it does say what change. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first question, number 1. What change should be made in sentence 2? So I underlined change, and what I did right there was I read the question loudly because I'm doing it as like in a class setting. I underlined change U. I went ahead and labeled sentence 2 so that we would know which sentence we're going to be looking at. And if you remember me showing you back in the passage, I even highlighted it, and I've even labeled question 1 right above the brackets, because what a lot of kids do mistakenly is they confuse the sentence number, in this case number 2, with the question number. So you have to be careful to make sure they have some sort of labeling where they mark the test in a certain way so that they won't get the sentence number confused with the question number. And then we write CUPS, knowing that it's a capitalization, usage, punctuation, or spelling mistake. Okay, so now we're going to we're going to evaluate sentence number 2. That way we can start eliminating. And what I've also done, it's a good idea to teach your kids to label all 4 letter choices. All odd numbers will always be A, B, C, D, and star. And all even numbers will usually be F, G, H, or J. But as I mentioned to you, I want to show you how to do open-ended, since we're going to be having to do that after this coming year anyway. So letter A, change has to had. That's usage, changing from present tense. And so what I would suggest that you do, you can draw a down arrow for present tense and a back arrow for past. Change no to no. Now, I was trying to think, how could I show that to you guys? You can teach your kids that there's 2 kinds of no's. They sound the same, so you have to do something different so they'll understand. This is no, and this one is no. So keep that in mind. And if you look closely, what I did there was I went ahead and wrote right next to the word no, I wrote knowledge. Comes from the root word no. And then C, change walls, plural, to wall, singular, possessive. That means that the wall owns something. And so I always recommend that you teach your kids to draw a little wall in front of the apostrophe. In this case, it draws a wall before, after the wall. And so we're going to check and see, is something owned by the wall in the sentence? Or D, change roof to Ralph. And something about spelling that I taught my kids is the one on the left is different than the one on the right. So we're going from left to right, and we're going from wrong to right. In this case, we're not going from wrong to right. We know that roof is the way you spell that. So sometimes before the kids even get to the passage, they can pick their answer. So what we'll be doing, the E stands for evaluate, and then start to eliminate. And the cool thing about the E is it has 3 sticks. The S, how many are you going to select? 1. And so basically, this was a glorified checklist. We are going to be eliminating 3, selecting 1, but now it's time to go read, underline, and label back in the passage. So question 1, I labeled it. Sentence 2, capital. Now, I want to show you myself while I'm doing this. So watch me in the corner there. I'm going to be pretending to put on a cap right here because of the capital. So capital, it has a floor. It is the subject, has present tense, a floor, but no walls or roof. A says change has to had. Capital, it had a floor, but no walls or roof. Now, we did hear that the passage was in past tense, and so it would make sense to have has changed to had. And so I'm going to put a little question mark right there because that does make sense. It has a floor, but no walls. Are we asking about knowledge here? Are we talking about knowledge? No, we're just talking about that there are no walls. So we would not want to choose that one. What I like about this is you're eliminating in the passage before you even touch the booklet or the scantron. C said wall, change walls, plural, to wall, apostrophe S. I threw my hand up in the air to toss an imaginary ball up in there because the apostrophe is up and the comma is down. Up apostrophe, comma, come on down. Let's see if the wall is owns anything. You cannot own an or. So that wouldn't make sense. And so all I have left was that D that we said Ralph to Rue. So the only one that made sense was letter A, change present tense to past tense. We'll select A, already selected in the book. Now we're gonna bubble in this A right here and pretend like we are bubbling the scantron, because some of your kids are so careless. I've met them. And I'll write A right next to it. And one more thing that it would be a good idea to do is, I learned this trick last year from an administrator. He said he used to have his kids write the letter right next to the number of the question that you're on, so that in this case, the 1A in the book will match the 1A in the scantron. So we've read the passage and the question, we've underlined in both places, we've labeled in both places. How many did we eliminate? 3 little sticks, 3 eliminations. How many did we select? 1 in the book, and we would go to the scantron and only check off that second S once we've done that. So that's question number 1. Let's check out number 2. Okay, so before I get into the second one, I do want to take a moment to ask a silly question. Raise your hand if you have your hand. Well, I have my hand, but I don't have a good memory, and I have a hard time keeping all of the strategies inside my head. So since your kids will have the hand on the day of the test, I'm going to show you a graphic organizer really quick that will allow your kids to just draw out their hand, trace their hand, and write the letters CUPS and that other S in case they get any questions about run-ons or fragments. And so let me show you what that looks like right here. This is my ELAR graphic organizer, and this portion is for editing. This section here is for the introduction, the body, and the conclusion for an essay. And the cool thing about the red lines is, what is the purpose? What is the prompt? Wonder Woman. And we'll get more into that when we talk about essays. And on the inside is another hand where we can work on what I call reading or revising. That's why I call it my revising graphic organizer. And so whether you're talking about a paragraph or a whole passage, adding a sentence to one of those, or just adding a word, a phrase, a transition, combining sentences, or adding, removing, or replacing a sentence, we'll use the arm. So because of today's purpose, we're only working on editing. So really quickly, you can teach your kids to just trace their hand like I mentioned, but I highly recommend that you get the digital copy or the hard copy of my graphic organizer that allows you to cover editing, revising, and expository. The C is for capitalization, underline CAP-itals, proper nouns. The U is for usage, and I use Spider-Man because he's going to use his web. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see him. He's going to use his web to decide, is this subject singular or is this plural? And that's why his fingers are like that. Is it singular or is it a plural subject? Is it simple or compound? Is the body of the sentence, is this predicate past? We talked about that. Present or future? Predicate is the action. The action is the verb of the sentence. And in order for the sentence to be complete, as long as his web keeps the subject and the predicate together, you have a sentence, which is a street that you pave. Well, every street needs a stop sign at the end. And the cool thing, he has red shoes. Our stop sign would be either a period, an exclamation, or a question mark. So anything involved with usage, you're checking for singular, plural, simple, or compound subjects, past, present, or future predicates, actions, verb. Are they simple? Are they compound? A few other things we'll get into later. The P is punctuation. We're going to slow down the sentence with commas in 4th grade or 3rd grade and lower. Apostrophes, contractions, and I have little quotation marks there and a little mouth. I always tell kids it's sort of like having your dimples. So right here next to, a lot of kids have little dimples right here. And I was like, I can use that. So I think your opening quotations are a warning right before you talk. What you say is your dialogue. And then you have your closing quotation. So you can sort of say it's your opening and your closing dimples. And so look around for somebody in the class with dimples, and the kids can say, oh, I'm going to use so-and-so to remember my quotation marks when I write. Now, we just finished mentioning that every sentence needs a stop sign, a period, an exclamation mark, or a question mark. For spelling, they've got to see the word, say the word, pronounce the syllables. That way they can be hearing and listening, think about what spelling rules they've learned, try to decide, do I need a book called a dictionary to remember this word, what it means, or how to spell it? If I do, then I'll look it up. And if not, then I will be able to hopefully write the right answer. He has his right hand up there. And as we mentioned, the other S is about run-ons, never stopping to put a period, or fragments. It's what I call reader's whiplash. I was enjoying your sentence and suddenly you slammed me into the wall before we finished giving the reader our subject or predicate. The other picture there is just about penmanship on this open-ended one that we're going to see in just a moment. It doesn't matter to me whether they write in print. If I raise my hand like this, that's Iron Man. None of his fingers are touching. And in print, no letters can be touching. Aqua Man is cursive, where your letters are touching. You can swim a lot faster if you have your fingers closed like that. Now, I don't mind kids writing in print, Iron Man, or cursive, Aqua Man. I just want them to pick one or the other. Don't write printsive. Printsive is basically when they have print letters that are just kind of smashed together, and we don't want that. So let's take a look at number 2 that I shared with you, so you can see how to do an open-ended question, because we're going to have to get used to them anyway. It says, I'm going to read it. What change should be made in sentence 4? I've underlined change again. I've labeled CUPS question 2 and a bracket around sentence 4. And so I've highlighted sentence 4 in the passage. And it says here, I'm going to show you the answer, capital change than to then. Basically, it's usage, okay? How it's being used is usage. There's no conversion from then. Than is when you're comparing. Then is to when, which we'll see in the passage in just a second. So let's go take a look at sentence 4. There it is. Now, what have I forgotten to do? Like I did on question 1, it's a great idea to write, okay, sentence 4 is about question 2. Capital, than, capital, I noticed my new neighbor, capital Sam, and what I'm doing is I'm making Sam verbal because I'm saying capital next right before I say his name, and I'm even pretending to put on a cap. And the cool thing about a cap, it makes you look a little bit taller than you really are, walking by with his father, okay? Still in past tense, still in first person. So are we comparing? I've never seen the word than start a sentence. So since we're not comparing, we're saying a moment in time. At that moment, then, when? Then I noticed my neighbor Sam walking by with his father. Nothing else seems wrong. Some kids might try to change neighbor because they can't hear the GH. They might try to change walking to walk by, but it doesn't sound right. They might try to change by, BY to BUY. Another thing, father, I've seen some kids that will capitalize father, and what you have to check is, are they calling him father? No, they're just saying his father. It belongs to somebody. But if you're calling them that, hey, dad, hey, father, then you have to capitalize it. So in this case, like I mentioned to you, we are going to evaluate like we did. And this time there's nothing to eliminate, but we have read both the passage and the question. We've underlined, we've labeled, we've evaluated, and we decided that we're going to select this, that we're going to capital change than to then, period. All right, so hopefully you're enjoying this. On we go to question number 3. What change, if any, should be made in sentence 9? All right, I've labeled the first one already for you, so let's go ahead and see what we have on the side. You put the R for reading it, softly or loudly. What change, if any, should be made in sentence 9? You see we've underlined the word change. I've labeled sentence 9, question number 3, and CUPS. So now we've got to decide. Let's evaluate the sentence in the passage. That way we can decide which ones we're going to eliminate. But before we do, let's check and see what kind of mistakes we're looking at. Of to in, that's usage because that's two completely separate, different situations. Change had in past tense to has. He has something. That's present tense. That's also usage. Change friends to friend. So all you're doing is you're changing plural to singular. And that's also usage. That's not spelling because it depends on how you're using them. And then, of course, no changes needed. So let's take a look. I want you to notice that I do have an additional thing. Some of your kids are really observant. And in this one, if it was open-ended, you could also say remove the word a, and it would make sense. And I'll show you why when we're reading question, sentence number 9. All right, here it is. Capital, by the end of the day, comma, and I have a shorter bounce, and so I want you to notice that I made a little table, T for table, and I have a little comma on the table. I wouldn't stop the sentence completely. For these yellow ones, we just slow the sentence down. That's what yellow means, caution. Red means stop. And so I'm using my ball technique. I would bounce my imaginary ball on the table. My hand disappears. I'm bouncing it on the floor. So that's a comma. We would bounce it on the table. So let's read that again. Capital, by the end of the day, comma, capital, I had, past tense, a beautiful new treehouse and a new friends, period. My hand disappeared, so that means I was bouncing on the floor. So let's see what the letter choices say. A says change of to in. By the end in the day, that sounds really weird. eliminate. B, change had. The entire passage was in past tense. Now we're going to switch it to present. Let's find out if that makes sense. By the end of the day, I has doesn't make sense no matter what tense you're using. So B, let's eliminate it. All right. C, by the end of the day, I had a beautiful new treehouse and a new friend. Now, that is the answer. Let me go ahead and double check D real quick for you. Oh, D said that no change was needed, and that doesn't sound right. But listen to my alternative. It said you could remove the word A. Listen to how this sounds. Capital, by the end of the day, comma, capital, I had a beautiful new treehouse and new friends. Why did I say new friends? Because I noticed on the sentence before, Sam and his father spent the entire afternoon helping me. It doesn't say anything about a relationship being built, a friendship being built. And so just because Sam might be my age, I could have new friends. And so if this one happened to be open-ended, they're going to have to be careful when they do open it in the state, because only one answer is probably going to be acceptable, or you're going to have to be careful as the one who's reading these open-ended responses to see if their response is reasonable. And that's something that we need to be careful about when we're actually testing. So with that, we're going to go on to the next one. Okay, so this next passage is about weather. I don't know whether or not to tell you about weather. The reason I'm doing that, I'm trying to make it kinesthetic so your kids can remember the difference between them. And hopefully their brain will take a picture of what weather looks like as a spelling word compared to whether or not they know which weather that they're writing about. So keep in mind that when we read the passage, we're going to be able to check the instructions first to find out the pre-read, the purpose. We can sometimes check the point of view if it's a story. We can check if it's past, present, or future. So just like last time, I've gone ahead and written out for you the pre-read, the purpose. Is it revising? Is it editing? And I already know it's editing because I can see the word corrections there. And so you might have your kids right away, as soon as they see corrections, you're making grammatical corrections. That means you're doing editing. Capitalization, usage, punctuation, or spelling. Once again, there is no title for some reason. I don't know if they did that, like I mentioned, for all the editing passages, or they just decided to do that for third grade. What's the purpose? It seems to be expository, where this student, Amy, is writing her paragraph, just explaining about the weather and things that we could do to help us predict the weather, to learn about the weather, etc. And once again, for those of you that debate over whether we should have the kids read the entire passage or just the sentences, I'm not taking a reading test today. I'm taking an editing test. And so since they're telling me, they're only asking me about sentences 2, 4, and 8. If you have kids who are not on the passage level, and they're not even on the paragraph level, which is what this is, then it's highly recommended that you tell them, okay, just focus on the sentences that they're asking about and see if you can figure out from there. And hopefully you can have them build their endurance. It's always nice to be able to be fluent readers, but too many kids fall in the gaps and struggle. So let's do our last 3 questions. Number 4, I'm gonna read the question. What change should be made in sentence 2? All right, I've highlighted this time, and we said we're gonna label that it's question 4, that it's CUPS, and that it's sentence 2 that we're looking at. So I've underlined, I've labeled, and now I can evaluate sentence 2 to see if reason, singular, needs to be changed to reasons, plural usage. Should to be changed to should. Wrong to right. Every time the one on the left is spelling error, tell them, are you changing it from wrong to right? No, we're changing it from right to wrong, and you would never want to do that. So I already know my brain is telling me that I have never seen that word should before. Change our means mine and yours to yours, just yours. So we got to find out what they're fixing or what they're working on. Is it something that we're doing together, that it's our project, or is it just your project? Measured, past tense, and draw a little arrow. To measure, something you can do right now, or measure, it could be something you do in the future, depending on what words are in front of it. I'm going to measure. And so then we are going to be able to select one answer. Let's take a look and see what it says. Reason to reasons. All right, let's see. For this reasons, that sounds weird. Should to should, we already said that we're not going to change it to an incorrect spelling. For this reason, we should make your own outdoor center. I don't think we should change to from us to talking to you. I think that if we're doing it, then it should be our project, not something that I'm doing for you. So I don't think that would be a good answer either. And we should try to make our own outdoor center. To measured the weather, let's try what they ask us to do, to measure the weather. So we should means something that will happen in the future. We're going to measure the weather. And that one does make sense. So I'm gonna select J. Make a tiny circle. I've already read all of them. I've eliminated these 3 now, so I can put 3 check marks next to the E for eliminate. And again, it's just a glorified checklist, but we can pretend to fill it in with the letters so we don't forget what it was, then write it again over here. And some of that stuff is just extra work, but the more careful you get your kids about what they put in the book, hopefully the more careful they'll be about transferring it over to the scantrons. Because imagine all that hard work that they do just to bubble wrong or to forget to bubble completely. That means I need to go to the scantron. So they should not check this S until they've actually done the scantron. They go, okay, I've done that one, and now I can do number 5. I would probably save that last check mark for the end when you're done with the whole test. Sentence 5 is multiple choice, and sentence 6 is open-ended. So let's try sentence 5 since we're right there already. What change should be made in sentence 4? Okay, again, we read it. We underlined change, and we labeled 3 things. Sentence 4, CUPS, and that we're going to go find this. This is for question number 5. So we don't get question 5 confused with sentence 4. All right. We've already labeled. Now we're going to label the answer choices. Change better to good. Understand more. Right next to good place, you're going to notice a good place to start. So if you're saying you're understand more, we're comparing. So a lot of kids might select good. Let's find out if we should or not. Some kids might say no because they're comparing. It sounds like we're comparing at least. Change place to place. I've never seen that before. Change would be future to was past tense. Change with to from. That's completely different usage. So I've got to check and see which one of these I've got to evaluate so that I can decide which 3 to eliminate and which one to select. All right, sentence 4 says, oops, I went back too far there. Sentence 4 says, a good place to start. Since F says good place to start, it does sound good, and we're not comparing to the more about whether. A good place to start would be with a thermometer and a gauge. So I'm going to put a little circle around the F with a question mark. Place to place with an S, we already said our brain doesn't recognize that. A good place to start was be. That doesn't make sense. We can't pick it. And then let's check letter D, change with. Sorry about that. Change with to from. There it is. Plug it in for you. Again, this is just extra precautions that your kids can do so to make sure they're checking the right sentence and doing the right thing to the sentence. Capital, a better place to start would be from a thermometer and a range gauge. I think that I need to work with the thermometer and a range gauge. I don't think we need to start from a thermometer and a range gauge. We're going to be using them. So I think they mean with a thermometer, but that's a pretty good distractor that might throw off a lot of your kids. Final answer, a good place to start. And in addition to eliminating the 3 that you're not going to pick, sometimes it might be a good idea to do an extension, do another example. A good friend of mine is named Jorge Macias. A better friend to me is George Guerra. I'm actually using some of my real friends here. Sorry, guys. My best friend is Oscar Laredo. And that wasn't true. I just wanted to teach your kids to use examples. I call it, I'm going to write it down so you can see it. Sometimes there's what we call TMI, too much information, that we hear from kids or they hear from us, unfortunately, sometimes. But I call it a teachable moment of instruction. That instead of just rushing off to the next problem, go ahead and share, oh, let me give you another example of that because there's something that came to my mind. Sometimes if things go really haywire, the TMI instead could mean a teachable moment of intervention. For example, you're practicing some of these strategies and the kids are way off base or getting off course. You might say, you know what, guys, we need to stop. We need to do intervention here. Let's fix this issue. We're not understanding quite what we're supposed to be doing here. So a teachable moment of intervention. So we did select one, and when we finish the whole booklet, we're gonna go to number 5 in the Scantron. So we're gonna fill in letter A and make sure that the 5A in the book matches the 5A in the Scantron. We're good to go. Now, number 6, I put it open-ended just so we could practice. What change, if any, should be made in sentence 8? I did read it. I underlined change again. I labeled 3 things. CUPS, question 6, sentence 8, bracketed in. It's highlighted. And you're going to notice that they have the words, the city named capital El Paso to capital L, capital Paso. In the same way that sometimes kids will capitalize their first name but not their last name, we need to remind them that you have to, if a city has two names, we want to make sure we capitalize both names. And so, like I mentioned to you, we're gonna go take a look at it. That's the mistake, and because it's open-ended, I highly suggest you have your kids write their answer in a complete sentence. So it would sound like this: capital change, capital El Paso, didn't put a cap on because it's not capitalized, to capital L, capital Paso, period. My hand disappeared, means we're going to write a period. So before we take a look at the answer choices, let's see another TMI, a little teachable moment of instruction, or if your classroom is forgetting to capitalize things that have more than one word, then here's 5 examples of other cities in the United States that have 2 words. So let's practice with our mouth, with our cap, and verbalizing the capitalization. You can even have your kids underline CAP-itals, proper nouns if you want to. Capital New, capital Orleans. Capital Las, capital Vegas. Capital Los, capital Angeles. Capital San, capital Diego. Capital Oklahoma, capital City. So that's 5 different examples. We can do a teachable moment of instruction. Now, let's take a look at sentence 8 so we can see that it was, in fact, the mistake that we need to look for. Capital, we, subject, would also have fun. Try to get your kids not to use the word fun when they write on their own, because we would call that an off-limit word, a dead word, a watered-down word. Learning about the weather, not weather, in our city of capital L, capital Paso, period. We would need to change that proper noun to both words capitalized. All right, so that's my video on Grade 3 ELAR Editing Set 1. I hope you liked it. Feel free to email me at one of those 2 email addresses on the upper right-hand corner here. You could message me on Facebook, through Instagram, connect with me through Twitter. Watch more videos on Facebook if you type May the 4s. I have a writing club if you're not already a member of the club. If you just type, instead of looking for my name, Bill MacDonald, just type May the 4s, and that would be enough. You can find my club, click join, and I'll accept you within a couple of hours unless I'm training that day or something. If you liked the digital copies that I used, the hard copies I used, you can get a digital copy there at the right prescription on Teachers Pay Teachers, or on my website at www.therightprescription.com. I'll go ahead and put some links for those for you below. My next video will be 3rd grade, watch for it, 3rd grade revising set 1, and hopefully we'll have a set 2 to go along with it instead of repetition like they had on this first passage. Goodbye, you guys. God bless, and have a great rest of your day.